What's up with y'all? I don't know what's up with Paul George. Like, I don't know if y'all seeing what I'm seeing, but I think he stuffed the Sixers for that paper. You know what I'm saying? Like, a lot of people come to Philly, a lot of free agents or people with names come to Philly and get a bag and then slide or don't perform to their ability. I can name them: Andrew Bynum, uh, um, what other free agents that we got that had a name? Elton Brand. Um, um, I ain't really a Sixers fan, so I can't really think off the top of the head of all the players that they got that was trading signs or came from free agency and with a name and got them for the paper. Paul George got 212 for the next 4 years. Come on, man. You know what I'm saying? And he an average player. Now he below average because I just think that he was never, like that after the knee injury. He was like that. He was on his way up, but after that knee injury, I think that was just, you know what I'm saying? And I think the NBA just, cashed him out on his strength because, you know what I'm saying? He did he messed his leg up on national TV like that. So, let's get into it. Check it out. See what y'all think.
What's going on, everybody? I originally was a pretty huge fan of Paul George, and honestly, what was not to like about him? I remember during the 2010 NBA draft lottery, Danny Granger was wearing a John Wall jersey underneath his shirt because he so desperately wanted some help in the Eastern Conference. And although the Indiana Pacers didn't get the number one overall pick, they without a doubt drafted the best player in the entirety of the 2010 NBA draft class. You didn't see much of Paul George in his rookie season, but he really started to shine during the 2011 to 2012 season, more specifically in a six-game series versus the Miami Heat. Behind Paul George, Roy Hibbert, George Hill, and Darren Collison, in addition to the theatrics of Lance Stevenson, the Indiana Pacers had an identity, and they were the underdog versus the Miami Heat in the Eastern Conference for three straight seasons, peaking during the 2012 to 2013 series in the Eastern Conference Finals that went to 7 games. These battles made Paul George into a hero, and for the first time since the Reggie Miller era, the Indiana Pacers had some hope moving towards the future. Now, in the summer of 2014, things would take a turn for the worse. Paul George would get injured for the 2014-15 season, and when he returned, his supporting cast was a shell of its former self. And this is when the public opinion on Paul George began to turn, because as he ascended into that superstar caliber player, he had moments that indicated that he truly wasn't capable of being a leader on a team. The most famous instance of this was during the 2017 NBA playoffs, where CJ Miles infamously took the final shot in Game 1, and Paul George had this to say following the incident.
So I gave it up, to soften it up and try to get it back. I talked to CJ about it. Situations like that, I got to be the last shot. We won the fourth quarter, which we needed to do to close this game out. We gave up a lot of open threes, just not matching up, a lot of lapses, and just not communicating and being on the same page. We limit that, and we walk away 1-0.
Jeff Teague was Paul George's teammate at the time, and he gave us a bit of an insight as to how it all went down.
He definitely had a good game. PG had a chance to hit a game winning to send us the game with 5.
I like Jeff Teague. Jeff Teague be talking real stories. I gotta tune in to Jeff Teague.
My fault, CJ. Remember when, I don't know if y'all remember the series, but I remember game 1. CJ had a shot at the buzzer to win. He took it and he missed, and PG was like, I gotta have that shot. You remember that? Like,
He said it in the press conference.
Yeah, I gotta have that shot. So CJ was my man. CJ was like, damn, was that a bad shot? I'm like, bro, that's the best shot we can get. Like, if you damn near hit that motherfucker, like, I'm like, bro, you don't even have time to get the ball to him. Like, it's cool, bro. Like, it was a good shot. So he was a little frustrated about it. No push. Game 4, the same exact happened. They threw it to CJ. That CJ fired at the PG, and he missed it. Right? He had like side back with a tough shot. He was not gonna come close. He in the locker room. I'm not gonna see him. I'm like, go to the crib. Time to have some fun. Cause CJ, he did me like this. It was the Gatorade commercial. With the shot on the clock. Somebody had made it, and he had bricked that bit.
Ironically, Paul George would have the opportunity to take the final shot to tie the game in Game 4, and this was the result of it. Now, this is just the very first indication that Paul George might not necessarily have the greatest mic skills, but you'd see an expansion of this once he went to Oklahoma City. Paul George would get traded to the OKC Thunder, form a big three with Carmelo Anthony and Russell Westbrook. They truly weren't the most intimidating big three, but that didn't stop Paul George from giving us one of his cringiest interviews of all time that would haunt him for the rest of his career.
Y'all ain't met Player P yet, huh? Man, it's a fun guy to watch. You know? It's an out-of-body person where I just lock in and put myself into a different zone.
This clip would haunt Paul George for the remainder of his career, and would just be another instance that this guy has no mic skills at all whatsoever. And probably his worst interview to date was during his final game with the OKC Thunder when Damian Lillard did this to him. In which, following the game, Paul George was so lost for words that the only thing he could say is this.
I mean, that's a bad shot. I don't care what anybody says, that's a bad shot. But, hey, he made it. That story will be told that it was a bad shot. Live with that.
Could you imagine someone hitting that buzzer beater on you and you're so butthurt about it happening that all you could really say is it's a bad shot? Like, you could call it a difficult shot, or you could call it a shot that is unlikely to go in. But calling it a bad shot is ridiculous. Now, Paul George would eventually get traded to the Los Angeles Clippers for a package that, without a doubt, ruined the Los Angeles Clippers. I mean, there's an alternate reality where the Los Angeles Clippers stay pat and don't trade Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Danilo Gallinari, 5 first-round picks, and 4 first-round pick swaps in exchange for Paul George. And sure, you get Kawhi Leonard on top of this, but the entire Paul George-Kawhi Leonard era was an unmitigated disaster. In year 1, analysts were saying that Paul George and the Los Angeles Clippers were the favorites to win the Western Conference, and it wasn't a bold take at all whatsoever. You have 2 of the best two-way stars in the NBA being coached by one of the most respected coaches in the NBA at the time in Doc Rivers, so clearly fans were expecting the Los Angeles Clippers to be the new face of the West. And given the fact that both of these stars have a history of being injury prone, in year 1, both the Los Angeles Lakers and Clippers finished at the 1st seed and the 2nd seed. And then the NBA was suspended due to a pandemic, but this was a blessing in disguise for the Clippers as it gave Kawhi Leonard and Paul George an opportunity to rest. The Los Angeles Lakers did what they were supposed to do. They made it to the Western Conference Finals and were ready to face off against the Clippers in the Battle of LA. But the Los Angeles Clippers choked in a fashion that was so terrible that Playoff P got rebranded into Pandemic P, choking a 3-1 series lead with plays like this.
Leonard for 3. Beverly kicks it out.
They've gotten a number of second shots, though.
George, way off. It's the side of the backboard.
Fortunately, the Clippers would get this close again during the 2020-21 season, but Kawhi Leonard would get injured in the Western Conference Finals, and the Clippers would lose 4-2 against the Suns. During the 2021-22 season, Kawhi Leonard would get injured, and the Clippers would be in 8th seed. During the 2022-23 season, both PG and Kawhi would suffer from injuries, and during the 2023-24 season, Kawhi Leonard would once again get injured right before the playoffs. Paul George and the Clippers couldn't agree to a contract extension at this point, and I can't really blame the Clippers given the fact that there's a brand new CBA. I did think it was a little questionable to offer to pay Kawhi Leonard a fully maxed contract, but not Paul George, and I even criticized the Los Angeles Clippers for the way they handled his free agency, because the Golden State Warriors were interested in trading for Paul George.
As you all know, Paul George was going to come to the Warriors, and we wanted Paul George to come to the Warriors. For us to get Paul George, it would have taken a sign and trade, and the Clippers didn't really want to play ball. And, whereas you could have gotten something back for Paul George walking, they get absolutely nothing back.
But alas, the Los Angeles Clippers were content just letting him walk. And it didn't even seem like Kawhi Leonard was so bothered by it. Ultimately, Paul George went to the highest bidder, signing a 4-year, $211.5 million contract with the Philadelphia 76ers. The Sixers were seen as huge winners of this offseason. I mean, they drafted Jared McCain, they were able to lock up Tyrese Tyrese Maxey. They had depth, and they had a championship-winning head coach. And now they had one of the best two-way guards in the entire NBA, coming off of a season where he was shooting 40% from three. But in hindsight, if you take a look at both what the Los Angeles Clippers did and what the Sixers did, I have to give the Clippers their flowers. Honestly, I destroyed this team in the offseason, but by letting Paul George leave for nothing, they were able to sign Derrick Jones, Chris Dunn, and bring back Nicholas Batum. They signed James Harden to a 2-year, $70 million contract and took a chance on Kevin Porter Jr. and signed Terrence Mann to a contract extension. Now, the Clippers are still trying to trade away PJ Tucker, but when you take a look at where they are currently, I have to admit it's very, very impressive. They're currently in 7th place in the Western Conference, but mind you, this is without Kawhi Leonard. And sure, their ranking is subject to change. I mean, you have the Suns, Timberwolves, and the Warriors, and the Spurs that practically have the same record, but I expected the Clippers to be way worse off currently, just as I expected the Philadelphia 76ers to be a little bit better off than they currently are. And my issue with this situation isn't the fact that I think the Sixers made this horrific mistake, because I could understand why they did what they did. Tobias Harris finally left the team, and this was the first opportunity the Sixers have ever had to try to invest that capital wisely to get Joel Embiid, a star that could potentially help him win the NBA Finals. It was a different type of star. This wasn't like Ben Simmons, who choked away in the playoffs and had no work ethic. This wasn't like James Harden, who also isn't the greatest in the playoffs and fans were questioning his work ethic. This wasn't like Markelle Fultz and his thoracic outlet syndrome. Or Jimmy Butler, who worked out perfectly in Philadelphia, but they decided to choose Tobias Harris over him.
Tobias Harris over me?
A star that fit in seamlessly next to Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid. But there were whispers about the fact that both Joel Embiid and Paul George are the least motivated stars in the entire NBA. And now that Paul George got this type of money at the age of 34, are we really going to see the best version of him? Now, the season started out with Paul George struggling with injuries. And to compound this, once Paul George would join the Philadelphia 76ers, it's not like they looked that much better with him on the team. I mean, so far, Paul George has played in 18 games, and you could provide the rationale that he's been dealing with injury issues throughout the year. But when you take a look at his behavior off of the court, it's just insane. Fans have been quick to point out the fact that Paul George seems to be a little distracted. It seems like he's more focused on his podcast as opposed to being a good player for the Philadelphia 76ers to potentially win a championship. And probably the greatest indication of this was when Paul George decided to clickbait his team's own chemistry issues and players only meeting for the sake of viewership on his podcast, which I personally can't understand why a player would do that.
He's set, that's why.
Like me, whose sole job is to bring the coolest and most interesting news to your device, then that's one thing. But if you're actually a player in the NBA and money is no issue, you're getting paid millions of dollars to play for a team that has championship aspirations, then there's no way I would even think of starting a podcast. Unless if you're thinking about life after basketball. And at this point, I think Paul George will be fine after basketball. But that wasn't the only red flag.
200
also
mil.
noticed the fact that Paul George took a bit of a
I
slight
say,
at one of
you
the
mean
best players on the
150
Sixers, Jared
after
McCain. Now look,
taxes?
I've made fun of Jared McCain a lot on this channel, mainly because he's easy to make fun of. I'm sorry. Any basketball player that paints his nails and dances to TikToks, I'm probably going to make fun of you. I'm sorry. It's just too easy. It's like he's giving me material to make fun of him for. I mean, like, look at this. But I have to give credit where credit's due. When Jared McCain was healthy, he was performing incredibly for the Philadelphia 76ers. There's no question about it that the Sixers found a potential franchise cornerstone in Jared McCain. He was shooting 38% from beyond the arc and averaging 15 points per game. And what was Paul George's reaction to this? Well, he said that Jared McCain can't be our most consistent player. You could have said this in a much better way. You could have said, I need my other teammates to get on Jared McCain's level. You didn't have to neg the best player on your team. And it's just so comical because he's had all these L's throughout the season. More recently, Chris Paul was able to get a clutch shot on Paul George and then stared him down. But that aside, he's getting cooked on his own podcast.
What can't Lonzo do?
Can't stay healthy.
That has nothing to do with the game.
Yes, it does.
You can't say that.
Why not? Look at our boy.
But apart from getting cooked on his own podcast, podcast, fans have noticed that Paul George himself looks like he's cooked in general. The man could barely get off of his feet whenever he's driving to the basket. And probably the funniest part of all is if you compare Paul George this season to Tobias Harris has been the better player. Paul George has played in 18 games, is averaging a career low 16 points per game, is shooting 40% from the field and 31% from three. He hasn't shot this poorly since his second season in the NBA. And it's just so funny because meanwhile, you have Tobias Harris leading the Detroit Pistons to one of their most successful starts in quite some time. And the craziest part of all is the Philadelphia 76ers are now stuck with Paul George's contract for another 4 years. And I don't necessarily think I could see this getting much better. Before fans say that Paul George can magically turn it around, my question to you is, when has he ever turned it around? When has he ever been the reason that his team was able to make it to the NBA Finals? Why would he turn it around? He's getting paid significant money for the next 4 years. There's no reason to play at his best anymore. He's already finessed the Sixers into giving him over $200 million over the next 4 years. Of course he's focused on his podcasting career because there's really not much else for him to do on the basketball court. I'm 100% confident that he does not care whether or not he wins a championship, and why would he? He's getting paid either way. I'd say I feel bad for Joel Embiid too, but I personally don't know what his commitment to basketball is like. The Sixers could turn around their season. I mean, they're currently 11-17, so they're just a few spots out of a play-in spot. But the thing is, whenever you have a player that seems way more focused on his podcast metrics as opposed to his play on the court, then I really have no faith in that player at all whatsoever in improving his team's fortunes. Let me know in the comment section down below what do you guys think about all this, man. Do you think Paul George is going to be able to turn it around? Do you think he actually was a good signing for the Sixers? I'd like to hear what.
Hey, from my take, I think Paul George basically stuffed the Sixers, man. Hey, man, let me know what y'all think. Apologies about the phone, you know what I'm saying, about the little clues, but I give you raw content. I don't do all the editing and all that. No, I'm going to give you raw content. This is what I'm normally doing, watching the joint, seeing stuff, you know what I'm saying? Thanks for watching what Miz is watching. Tune in.